Welcome to San Antonio, Nova Nation All Access at the Final Four, and we've got a prime spot today here on the Bend. Got the Riverwalk right behind us here in San Antonio, and all kinds of Villanova fans all over the place in anticipation of what is coming just ahead. National semifinal game coming up against the Kansas Jayhawks. The day is here, and you get to a day like this, and everybody who's walking around with a smile on their face, there's an anticipation and just that little bit of nervousness too.
Yeah, anytime you get into a battle and competition like that, there's that little bit of anxiety. You don't know how the game's going to play out. I think we've talked to a lot of fans who have their ideas and how the guys and how's everyone feeling. I said, you know one thing from Villanova, they're going to come out and give you everything they have. They're going to compete. That doesn't mean they get every rebound. It doesn't mean they make every shot, but you're going to get our guys' best effort tonight.
We are going to be joined by Father Rob here on the show. We're also going to be joined by Keith Jones from NBC 10, a former Villanova basketball manager who's here covering things for the Philadelphia media, and Whitey Rigsby, radio analyst for the Villanova Wildcats, will be stopping by as well. Steve, how'd we get here? 4 wins over the course of the beginning of this tournament. It all started back in Pittsburgh against a Radford team that very clearly was overmatched. One very quick run in the first half of that game, and Villanova was really able to impose their will in that game.
Yeah, and it was one of those things, as you saw in this tournament, with the Virginia-UMBC game, Villanova came in and imposed their will early. Got a good jump, got it early on them early. Didn't let Radford kind of think they could hang around, and pretty much by halftime had the game in hand, continued to play well in the second half, and that set the stage for the rest of the tournament.
Alabama was a different story. That was a real struggle in the first half, and Dante DiVincenzo made that shot right before halftime, and then Mikal Bridges came in and just flat took over the game. He had 16 points in 2.5 minutes. One of the most amazing displays I've ever seen.
Yeah, and it was so interesting to see because he's on the bench in the first half with foul trouble. So usually you would think it would take a player a little bit of time to get back in the flow in the second half, but he came out guns a-blazing. As you said, I've never seen a run like that to start a second half, and really just took that from a 5-point game to a 20-point game, and really Alabama never recovered.
So then there's the matchup with West Virginia, and that is a team, Bob Huggins style, is going to hit you in the mouth. They're going to grind the game. They're going to take you down to their level of play, and they did it for a good portion of that game. And I got to tell you, if there was ever a time during the course of this tournament where some doubt might have crept in, it might have been Villanova down 6 with 11 minutes to go.
Yeah, and Coach Wright quickly called the timeout, and we asked him about that timeout. What did you say to the guys? He said, I just wanted to look them in the eye, make sure they were still confident, make sure they still believed in what we were doing. And he said, I saw that confidence in Phil and Jalen and Mikal, and I kind of felt like we were going to be okay. And then the guys went out and made some great plays in that stretch. I think it was an 11-0 run to kind of take the game over and kind of win going away.
Another Big 12 opponent in the regional final in Boston, and you know, Texas Tech ran out to a 9-1 lead in that game. Villanova built a 13-point lead at halftime. Texas Tech never went away, and it was, once again, a kind of a hand-to-hand combat kind of game that despite the fact that the Cats shot 4 for 24 from three-point range, that they survived.
And where they won that ball game was on the glass, out-rebounding Texas Tech, one of the better rebounding teams in the country, by almost 20 rebounds. So an outstanding job by Eric Paschal, Demir Cosby, Roundtree. The front court, Amari Spellman, really stepped up, and the Cats are here at the Final Four.
So now, here you are, Final Four and a game against Kansas. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday. There's been a lot of games between these two teams in recent years that have been iconic. This could be an iconic, I think a lot of people are looking at this game like it's going to be one of the most entertaining games we've seen in the tournament.
Yeah, because you see two really strong offensive teams where everyone on the floor can score the ball. A lot of three-point shooters outside around those big men. Azubuike will play on the low block for Kansas, where Amari will have the ability to step out, and Villanova will play with 5 three-point shooters on the court. Kansas, for the most part, will have 4 of them out there. So I think fans are anticipating a higher scoring game, but a lot of times with nerves and the strong defenses, I'm predicting more something in the 70s. I don't think it's going to be a grind out, 62-60 type game, but I don't think it's going to be a shootout in the 90s.
We are on the Bend here, and we've got Villanova fans walking by and celebrating as they get ready for the national semifinal game against Kansas. By the way, if you're going to be watching it on television from back at home, wherever you might be, you're going to want to go to the True TV broadcast, because that is a Villanova broadcast. Randy Foy and I will be taking you home, and all kinds of special Villanova content inside that. If you're going to watch, you can watch Jim Nansani here. Watch us tonight.
He's on every day.
So you have an idea now of what we think. However, what does the head coach think? I got an opportunity, as we got ready for this matchup, to catch up with head coach Jay Wright. I'm standing by with the head coach of the Villanova Wildcats, and Jay, you're back in a similar position, which reflected on that for just a moment. 2 times in 3 years. You know how tough it is to get here. I mean, it's an amazing tribute to the guys that are on the other side of this wall.
It really is, and I think the guys on our team are really knowledgeable about how rare this is. You know, I think they're really humbled by it. I think they're deserving of it. They've worked really hard. But I think there's a side of them that they realize, wow, I'm really blessed to be here. This is such a special experience.
A few years back, you told me after being at the Final Four in 2009 that you kind of get a feel for what it's like to be there, and if it didn't work the right way, there's that little bit of a knowledge of what it's going to be like next time you go back. Well, it worked right the first time with this group, but how important has that knowledge been this week with all of the things that you've had to do leading up to today?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to impact the game, Scott, but just being here 2 years ago, everything is very similar to the way it was in Houston. Even when we went in 16, we hadn't been there since 09, and the Final Four had changed a lot. A lot of the media responsibilities, a lot of the events you went to were a lot different than they were in 09. This is very similar, so it feels very comfortable. You just don't know if that's gonna pay off game time against a great Kansas team.
This is the third Big 12 team in a row. Different style, though, than the last two, and a little bit more mirroring your style.
Yeah, very, very similar to us, and I think it's why they got through the Big 12. You know, the Big 12 is a physical league, man. Those two games were tough on the bodies. These guys are physical enough to play with those guys, but really explosive offensively. And you watch the games that they played against these teams. They battled them, but in the end, they outscored them. So it's a really tough matchup for us defensively. We have been getting better defensively, so it's going to be really interesting to see.
Everybody talks about the defense and the fact that it's gotten better over the last 9 games. Everybody talks about your offense, which is one of the best historically in college basketball. Not many people have been talking about the rebounding, and of late, the rebounding, especially the offensive rebounding, has been huge.
Yeah, it really has. You know, when you're making a lot of shots, it's not easy to be a good offensive rebounding team. But you can't say you're just going to do it when you miss shots. You've got to be going to the glass all the time, even when you're making shots, so that it's a habit. And it bailed us out in the Texas Tech game. And you know what, it got us some buckets in the West Virginia game, too. And it has been important for us. And I think it's going to be important in the Kansas game.
Last thing, I don't like doing keys, but here we are. We're on the doorstep of this game with a chance to play for the national championship. If you win, what's going to be going right for Villanova if things are going in the right direction?
You know, by the time you get to this point, Scott, you got to put together a pretty complete game. You know, but when you're playing these teams, we're going to have one of our best defensive games. We're going to have to rebound it in one of our best games. Maybe it doesn't have to be the best, but it's got to be one. And then offensively, we're going to have to execute. And that just means if we're hitting threes, good. But if we're not, we got to get to the foul line. We got to get to the offensive glass. And we got to be able to hit our mid-range jumpers.
Proud of you. We all are. Good luck.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, in an NCAA tournament that seems to have been dominated by Sister Jean, we thought we would have our answer right here on Nova Nation All Access. Father Rob joins us. And first of all, it's great to have you here. It's been so much fun watching how that storyline has evolved over the course of the tournament. And, of course, everybody's asking you for your reaction to it.
Well, it's really a function of you guys in this business, isn't it? I mean, this isn't new to us. We pray, we do Mass, we celebrate with the faith. And now it's on this big stage. And Sister Jean has really put a beautiful face to it. And I couldn't be happy for her order, for Loyola. But I wouldn't be fooled by that smiling face. I think, you know, to live those vows for 70-plus years, to do a lot of the things that she's done in the places that she served in, that's a tough woman. And I think they're taking inspiration not just from her faith, but from her toughness.
Father, I want to ask you real quick. People see your role as, you say a prayer before and a prayer after the game. We know it's much more than that. How would you define your role with this team and what, I don't want to say Coach Wright's expectations, but kind of where you get involved with the players and the coaching staff?
I have a great privilege, and I would describe it really as relationship building. You get to build friendships and relationships with these young men. You see them when they come in, you know, and you kind of watch them grow. And I don't think people realize how much work it is to be a student athlete, particularly playing for Coach Wright. And so, you know, whether it's an injury or exams or travel or all the things that they have to juggle, I think so many times they have so many people in their life telling them what to do. And I try not to be another one of those people, and to have an opportunity to maybe listen to what's going on in their head and their heart, and offer words of encouragement, and really you build friendships that last a lifetime.
In hearing some of the messages that you've had for players, I've been lucky enough to be in there a number of times over the last several years. It's a great way of being able to not only look at basketball, but at life. Now, this is the which came first, the chicken or the egg. Is it from the faith? Is it from your teaching of this group of kids? Is it from Jay's way that he expects these kids not only to approach games, but life? Does it all just intertwine?
That's the beautiful thing about Villanova, is it really is all intertwined. I mean, we're seeing that now on this weekend where you have Easter and a party in San Antonio and the Final Four, and the faith is right there in the middle of it. But I think even Coach Wright would agree that we didn't invent these values. This is part of the tradition of our faith. This is part of the tradition of the Augustinians. It's been part of the DNA of Villanova since its inception, all the way back to 4 Augustinians who came over from Ireland with nothing but faith. And so we kind of use those values and highlight them. Why wouldn't we use them on our team? Why wouldn't we try to talk about hard work and brotherhood and sticking together and getting up when you're knocked down? And these are not values that we came up with, but really, to Coach Wright's credit, he's really seen it as a priority to make sure that they're infused into the program, and I love helping them do that.
Father, something I was able to notice up in Boston after the win over Texas Tech, at one end of the floor, Coach Wright has Denny Grace go up and cut down the last piece of net. At the other end of the floor, he has you go up and cut down the last piece of net, which is quite an honor and a thrill, but it says a lot about this program. And you're working with kids from all denominations, so it's not like we're beating them over the head with one specific faith.
That's right.
Talk about how these kids, I want to say buy in, but I want to call it more believe in what Villanova's teaching and what you're trying to do in your ministry.
We've all heard Coach Wright say it before, our roles are different, but our status is the same. And I really think it happens on the front end, on the recruiting side, that you're looking for young men who are not just exceptional athletes, exceptional basketball players, that really are open to the culture of what Villanova is. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be Catholic. It doesn't mean that everybody has to be in church all the time. But it really is a mind, body, and spirit endeavor. And so we really take great pride in hoping that you develop, your intellectual capacity, certainly physically, and there's a lot to be said about Shaq and our conditioning and all that. But why wouldn't we go for all three? And the spirit is a big part of it. And I think that we have young men who come from families who share those same values. They may not all be Catholic, but understand that this is a spiritual exercise, that strength comes from not just myself, but from one another, from my higher power. And together, as St. Augustine says, each of us strengthens all of us.
And obviously, each game it's in a game unto itself. So in a lot of ways, no one game is bigger than another. You have a great, grand perspective on, what these kids are and who they're going to be. At the same time, you're also a basketball guy. So people, when they see you on the sidelines, although you look calm, you're not always that calm, are you?
No, and we're classmates. This is our alma mater. So I'm rooting for my alma mater inside. But we all know, and this weekend really is a kind of a perfect example, because the Final Four is huge. This grand stage and what's going to happen in a few hours is huge. But it's not bigger than Easter. It's not bigger than our faith. It's not bigger than our brotherhood. And so when we work to kind of keep things in their proper context, I think it takes some of the pressure off. We talk a lot about the next game. It's not a big game because we're in San Antonio in the Final Four. It's a big game because we have an opportunity to do what we do for each other. And that might be in practice, or in this case here in San Antonio at the Final Four.
Father, you mentioned in a few hours they're going to tip off, but before that happens, you're going to have an opportunity to meet with the team before they eat their pregame meal, have a scripture reading, and then give a message. Have you thought about what that message might be for today?
Yeah, and fortunately, I don't try to recreate the wheel. And so I often draw from where we are as a team, where we are in the liturgical year, where we are in the season. And so, we've just come out of the season of Lent, which is all about sacrifice and giving up for one another. And now we're entering into the season of Easter. And today is Holy Saturday. And so really, a lot of it is about believing. It's easy to believe after something has happened. But the real key is, can you believe before it's happened? Can you believe that that what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish and the values that we espouse that might not put us on the front page of SportsCenter or the New York Times, things like sacrifice, things like the contributions that we could make that might not show up in the box score, do we believe that they really matter? And believe it not just on the surface, but with your whole being. And so this weekend is really about belief, and a belief that we all share in working through maybe our struggles and understanding that really with every cross there is a resurrection.
Father, you obviously been in great demand all weekend, national television and the like. Thanks so much for giving us the time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Exciting day.
Well, with a game like this one coming up tonight, it's huge, and it's huge for everybody involved, including the Villanova radio crew. We're joined now by the longtime voice of Villanova basketball on the radio side, Whitey Rigsby. Good to see you.
Scott, thanks so much for having me. It's great, just a great place to be, a great place, time to be alive, I guess. I enjoy being with you guys.
I'll tell you what, you look at where this team is and how they've gotten here, and it seems like they've been able to conquer everything that's been thrown at them. They had those couple of games in Boston where they kind of got hit in the mouth. They had the 2 games in Pittsburgh where it was almost on autopilot for a period of time in those games. Is this team strong enough because of what they've gone through so far to be able to finish the job?
I think they're strong enough because their coach is strong enough, and he's made them strong enough. Jay Wright is the most unflappable coach I've ever been around, and the team, therefore, is unflappable as well. When they get down, I think sometimes, and Jay's talked about it, the players come back to him and say, Coach, we got this. Whether it's 1 player or 5 players, they do a great job controlling their emotions on the court. You never see this team pointing to their muscles, pointing to their shirts. No, they play, they make shots, they make plays, then they go to the huddle and they talk about it and they do it again.
We talk about the atmosphere here. We're sitting on the Riverwalk in San Antonio, boats going by, millions of Villanova fans out there enjoying it. 40 years ago, your team plays in the Final 8 with an opportunity to go to the Final 4. I'm sure none of you guys ever thought it would be this big 40 years later.
No, Steve, you're right. And if you talk to Jay about it, just 9 years later when we were in Detroit, it was nothing like it is today. But yeah, I talked to Jay before the game the other day. I told him, I said, Coach, we were in the regional finals against Jim Spanarkel and Duke 40 years ago. I said, I think my parents went to the game. I'm not even sure if they did, but now as you're walking this Riverwalk, you can barely walk because there's so many fans of Villanova. But of all the teams here, it's huge. It's grown so big, and it's cool. Let's face it, you've been around a long time as well.
I'll tell you what, when you look around at this city too, I mean, this is almost an ideal place to have a Final Four. When we were in Houston a couple of years ago, everything was so spread out, long car drives back and forth. Everything here is walkable. I mean, this river walk alone is kind of worth it. This is a great place.
Yeah, and I don't know why they don't just keep it here. I mean, this is a great place. You're right. Houston was really good. The weather was nice, but it was a 5-mile drive to everything. Here, you don't have to drive anywhere. You just walk. You walk to the Alamo Dome. You walk to the Alamo. You walk to the Convention Center, and then you have the Riverwalk literally right behind the hotel where you have this great radio show, and people walk around like crazy and go to restaurants and bars. And the camaraderie here and the closeness makes this special. Why would you move from here?
All right, well, let's talk the game now. We're going to play in about 4 or 5 hours from now. I guess I don't want to, you don't have to give me your keys to the game, so to speak, but let's talk about some things you're going to be looking for in there. Let's start with Kansas, something you might want to see out of them that bodes well for Villanova, and something from Villanova that would bode well for them as well.
Well, I think foul trouble could be important. Their big guy tends to get a lot of foul trouble. I think he's going to have a very difficult job guarding all of the pick and rolls, and more importantly, guarding Amari Spellman on the perimeter. He's more of a classic inside kind of big man, and can he get out 20 feet and guard Amari Spellman? And if he does, it's going to open up our guys going to the basket, open up Jalen Brunson backing down, things like that. So I think their big guy versus our big guy is going to be a key to the game. These teams, they mirror each other. They're both very good shooting team. This is not going to be one of those Villanova Big 12 matchups we just saw last week. This is not going to be stodgy and slow. This is going to be up and down. They want to get up and run a little more. I think Villanova probably would like to get them a little more in half court, just play a little more half court offense, see how they do in that situation.
I got to think as well, we saw in Boston last week that Mikal Bridges, after being spectacular against Alabama, was not as prominent in what was being done. I got to imagine if the floor opens up a little bit more, this could be a Mikal Bridges or a Dante DiVincenzo kind of game.
Yeah, for sure. In Mikal's case, because he wants to get out and go. And remember, against Alabama, he was phenomenal in the first 5 minutes of the second half, had 18 points in about 4.5 minutes. So that's the good thing about this team. There's no one guy that you have to stop. There's no one guy that Villanova needs to stay on the court. Of course, Jalen Brunson is invaluable, but I mean, they have these guys who can just replace each other's spots. They're all basketball players. It's not really a two-man or a three-man. They all play, and I think it's cool when Dante DiVincenzo comes in and blows up in the first half, and then Mikal does in the second half. And you know what? It could be Eric Paschal, who's been terrific since January 1st. I mean, this team has a lot of guys who've played But I really think the change in this team, when this team became a Final Four team and hopefully a national championship team, was when Amari Spellman, all of a sudden it clicked defensively. He's made them a very good defensive team that they probably weren't in November, December.
You mentioned Jalen Brunson. You've been following Villanova basketball since the early 70s. Obviously, he's going to probably leave the school as the most decorated player we've had in the history of the school. You know, National Player of the Year, 2 Final Fours, potentially 2 national championships. If you could pick out 1 or 2 things that makes him so unique, so special, what would it be?
Well, I think the first thing when you think of Jalen Brunson, he's probably the most intelligent player we've had. He knows every part of the game like rocket science. I mean, he's really a cerebral player. I think he has a toughness. And again, I talked with Spinarca last week. He asked me about our players. I said, you know, people look at Villanova as this team from the suburbs and have all these suburban type kids that are kind of soft. Even Jay used to kid about, I finally got a kid from North Philly, Reggie Redding, and he's really a nice kid. Like, I want a tough kid. Jalen Brunson will rip your heart out. He is as tough a competitor as I've ever seen, and that along with the cerebral talent he has, and he's pretty darn good athletically. I mean, he can do everything on the court. I've never seen a player that can get anywhere on the court they want that's his size. Like LeBron James does that, but he can get anywhere he wants. He wants to shoot a jumper, he wants to get in the lane, he shoots a lane. There's so many things he does well, and when he gets the ball in the middle of the lane, whether he shoots or he just kicks out to those open people on the perimeter, this is the best team I've ever seen, getting the ball in the lane and making plays from there.
So as we wrap up with you here right now, we've got a pretty fair idea of the way we think this game is going to go. Are we still going to be here for the rest of the weekend, or are we going to be talking again on Monday?
We'll be here the rest of the weekend. We'll be here the rest of the weekend. I think Villanova's going to win this game. I think they're going to win the game by 8 to 12 points. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. You know, and I've said all along that making shots is the greatest Band-Aid for a college basketball team. You make shots, everybody thinks you played well. That's not always necessarily the case. This is going to be a game where teams will going to make shots. And I think that the team that plays the best defense on the perimeter is going to win the game. And whether it's Kansas or it's Villanova, I just think Villanova's a better defensive team than Kansas is at this point in the season.
Whitey, thanks a bunch.
Thanks, guys. Have fun.
Thanks, Whitey.
We are joined now by Keith Jones from NBC 10, but you probably, if you're a Nova fan, might remember him a little bit better from his time at Villanova, certainly representing pretty well today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a real thrill to be here and represent because I'm a gigantic homer. I owe a lot to the university and particularly the Villanova basketball family.
Now, if people were not aware, you were a pretty fair basketball player, and you were also a team manager for Jay.
I was an okay basketball player. I might have been able to play Division III ball. I played in a Burlington County All-Star game. I started too, which is like my big claim to fame. But when I chose Villanova, it was for academics. 3 weeks into it, I was practicing in St. Mary's Hall. They needed another guy to run because there was a leaky pavilion. I run with them, get my butt whooped, quite frankly. But I dove on the ground and did all the important things. And they said, hey, we don't have a position on the team, but we've got this student managing opening. And I said, sure, I'm going to take it. So essentially what I did for 3.5 years was assist the video coordinator, who at the time was Jason Crafton. After that, it was Andrew Francis. And I gathered tape from every single team. I traveled all over the country with the guys and learned some real great lifelong lessons and earned a family as a result.
Well, Keith, you got the pulse of the city of Philadelphia now with your job at NBC 10. Interesting tonight, you know, the Ben Franklin Bridge will be blue and white, Boathouse Row will be blue and white. Talk a little bit about how Villanova's connected with the Philadelphia community.
I still think we should go down Broad Street, though. We got on Market Street 2 years ago. It bummed me out. I said, come on, you know, this is a city that needs a winner, and thank goodness for the Eagles, you know, just a couple, 2 months ago, or what is it now? A month and a half ago, 2 months ago. I think it's really special. I think the city of Philadelphia has really embraced Villanova. I think it comes not only from what we do on television, but what you see on the court and how this team is represented with Coach Wright and those guys. They really buy into being appreciative and being humble and hungry, and I think the city of Philadelphia really buys into that. And you can tell this time of year, all of a sudden everything's blue and white, the Ben Franklin Bridge, as you mentioned, and as a Villanova alum, as you guys probably can share this, it feels really great to be embraced.
Your coverage right now, obviously being able to be there, you were in Boston too,
Yep.
So being able to be there, being able to have that kind of a finger on the pulse of the program in the city at the same time, what are your thoughts in mind for the types of stories that you're doing?
So we've got John Clark here from NBC Sports Philadelphia. So he does a lot of the stuff on the court. So what I get to focus on is Nova Nation. As an adjunct professor and as a former Villanova basketball manager, you're not going to see anything negative come out of me. So what I try to do is shine a great light on not only the Villanova band or the student managers or the cheerleaders, these groups that are kind of right on the periphery, but also just how loyal this fan base is. For instance, 2 years ago, we covered a group of students who traveled down from campus Villanova. I think it was like 1,600 miles all the way to Houston in an RV. None of them had tickets. Wouldn't you know it, the story airs within a couple hours and alum comes forward and buys them tickets. I mean, that's how special, Villanovans are. You really get what you give, so anytime I can shine a light on that, it's important. For instance, the later story we're going to do, we're comparing Sister Jean to Father Rob. And Father Rob is an incredible human being. It's so hard to get anything out of him of substance because he's so humble. So we're shining a light on that. So really just showing how special not only the university is, the great work that we're doing off the court, but also just how loyal this fan base is.
And Keith, you were here in the early years of Coach Wright. We had an opportunity to catch up with Randy Foye yesterday. He was going to be working with Scott on the TBS broadcast this weekend on the kind of the Homer vision, we like to call it.
Yeah.
But just talk about some of the standards, the punch, the kind of the code words, the code lines that are still there that have developed over the 16 or 17 years.
Well, first and foremost, this type of success, as you guys know, is just unprecedented. When I came my freshman year, I think it was Coach Wright's second full season. We were down in the dumps. We ended up going to the NIT and going out to Rutgers in the quarterfinal. And then suddenly by my junior year, I'm living with Kyle Lowry. We're number 1 seed in the tournament. We lose to the eventual national champs Florida after losing to the eventual national champs the year before on a phantom travel call against the University of North Carolina. So to experience this is incredible, but more so to be so involved as I was, all of those key words that Coach Wright had used, for instance, attitude was a big one. You love seeing that down the road with a commitment to these types of values, that you can't really control, everything that goes on in the court, but you can control your attitude. To see that play out and to see it be fulfilled in a way, where we all get to experience a national title 2 years ago and maybe this time around too, that's absolutely wonderful. And for that value too, attitude is the real big key word. It applies to what you do on the court, but also what we do here every day in life as human beings, as broadcasters, as fathers, sons, brothers, so on and so forth.
All right, so last thing. Who wins this game tonight?
Oh, boy. So I think Villanova wins. I think this is terrible. So I've been talking about this like crazy with people. People always ask me. I don't know whether it's because we've been so successful lately and this team seems deeper. I look ahead to Loyola, and I don't want to look ahead because that's the one thing I'm like, ugh. And I think that's the team that's the most dangerous because they've got absolutely nothing to lose. I think this will be a great game. It'll be the best game of the tournament thus far, and I think the best of today. I think Villanova comes out on top, though. I think they're the deeper team. I think if you look at every position, I would take our guys over their guys at every spot.
Keith, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. As a former student manager that watched you guys do this, to now being up here with you guys is a real honor. So thank you very much.
So that's going to do it from here. Are you ready? National semifinal is just a couple hours away. We are ready to go as Villanova will be taking on Kansas. It's been a pleasure to be here in San Antonio as Nova Nation All Access is taking you to the Final Four. For our guests and for Steve Pannone, Scott Graham, root 'em home tonight. Go Cats.